look at it as anything heavy and regretful. Like that's just part of being young and learning, right? And
It took 30 years of near misses, separate lives, and a silence that felt louder with every passing decade. But on a Wednesday night in Los Angeles, under the neon glow of a Sabrina Carpenter concert, the timeline finally healed itself. When the photos hit the internet, they didn't just trend, they sent a shockwave through an entire generation of pop culture fans. There they were, Brian Austin Green and Tiffani Thiessen, David Silver and Valerie Malone, the real-life it couple of the early 90s who imploded right as their on-screen lives were heating up. They weren't standing on opposite sides of a room, they were arm in arm, laughing, looking like the last 3 decades of drama had never happened. For anyone who grew up taping Beverly Hills, 90,210 on a VCR, this was the reunion that wasn't supposed to happen. We've seen cast reboots, we've seen conventions, we've seen the tragic funerals that brought the old gang back together. But Brian and Tiffani, that was the one dynamic that always remained a closed book. Until now, to understand why a simple photo of 2 actors at a pop concert is such a massive deal, you have to understand the sheer weight of the history between them. This isn't just about 2 exes saying hello. This is a story about teenage fame, a workplace that turned into a battlefield, and a breakup that was written into the script of the biggest show on television. Let's rewind to where it all started. The year is 1992. The internet is barely a concept, grunge is taking over the radio, and young Hollywood is ruled by a very small circle of stars. Brian Austin Green was the breakout heartthrob of Beverly Hills, 90,210. He played David Silver, the geeky underclassman who blossomed into the cool DJ, a character arc that mirrored Brian's own transformation in the public eye. Then there was Tiffani Thiessen. She was fresh off Saved by the Bell, the ultimate girl next door. Kelly Kapowski when these two found each other. It was a marketing dream, but it was also intensely real. They weren't just dating for the cameras. They were deeply, obsessively in love in the way only teenagers can be. They moved in together almost immediately. By modern standards, it sounds insane to kids, barely old enough to vote, playing house in the Hollywood Hills. But you have to remember the pressure cooker they were living in. They were the royalty of the teen magazine circuit. Their faces were plastered on bedroom walls from Tokyo to Toronto. In a world where everyone wanted a piece of them, they found a sanctuary in each other. Brian has since admitted that the intensity of that time was overwhelming. They were trying to figure out who they were as human beings while the entire world was watching. They were inseparable. They were the couple that seemed destined to go the distance. But the universe and the casting directors at Fox had other plans. The year 1994 changed everything. Beverly Hills, 90,210 was in crisis. Shannen Doherty, the show's lightning rod and undisputed star, was out. The show needed a replacement, someone who could fill the massive void left by Brenda Walsh. They didn't need a clone. They needed someone who looked like an angel but could play a villain. Tiffani Thiessen was looking to shed her squeaky clean image, and the role of Valerie Malone was the perfect vehicle. Here is where the story gets complicated. Brian was reportedly thrilled. He helped champion his girlfriend for the role. It seemed like the perfect setup. He was already established on the show, and now the love of his life would be joining him at work. No more long days apart. No more scheduling conflicts. It was supposed to be a dream scenario. But as the old saying goes, be careful what you wish for. Tiffani got the job. She walked onto the most famous zip code in television history, and almost immediately, her real-life relationship with Brian began to fracture. The timing is almost too precise to be a coincidence. Tiffani joins the cast in 1994. By 1995, the it couple is done. The dream of working together turned into the nightmare of breaking up in front of a crew of 200 people. Imagine the scene. You have a massive fight at home, you break up, tears are shed, and hearts are broken. Then, at 6 a.m. the next morning, you both have to drive to the same studio lot, sit in the same hair and makeup trailer, and pretend everything is fine. But it was worse than that. The writers of 90,210 were notorious for blurring the lines between fiction and reality. As Brian and Tiffani were untangling their lives off from their characters, David and Valerie were often thrust into romantic storylines on screen. They had to film makeout scenes. They had to film scenes of intense jealousy and longing. They had to look into each other's eyes and recite lines about love while their real-life connection was turning into ash. It was a specific kind of psychological torture that few people will ever experience. And Tiffani wasn't just dealing with a breakup. she was walking into a lion's den. The set of 90,210 in the mid-90s was legendary for its cliques and politics. The female leads, Jenny Garth and Tori Spelling, were the established queens of the set. They had grown up together over 4 seasons. They were best friends. And suddenly, here comes this new girl, Brian's girlfriend. The outsiders stealing the spotlight and taking the vixen role. Rumors from that era painted a brutal picture. There were stories of the girls not speaking to Tiffani between takes. Stories of a divide on set that left Tiffani isolated. Brian was caught in the most impossible position imaginable. On one side, he had his ex-girlfriend, whom he still cared for but was trying to distance himself from. On the other side, he had his work wives, the women he had grown up with and had to film with every day. It was a high school cafeteria dynamic playing out with million-dollar contracts on the line. For Tiffani, those early years on 90,210 must have been incredibly lonely. She has spoken in later years about how hard she had to work to earn her place. She wasn't just fighting for screen time. She was fighting for respect in a workplace that viewed her as an interloper. And she had to do it all while watching her ex-boyfriend navigate his newly single life right in front of her face. Brian, for his part, didn't exactly stay single for long. And this is where the 90,210 family tree gets even more tangled. Following his split with Tiffani, Brian eventually moved on to another co-star, Vanessa Marcil, who joined the show later as Gina Kincaid. If the breakup with Tiffani was sad, the relationship with Vanessa was volatile. They had a child together, a son named Cassius. But their relationship dissolved into years of public feuds and custody battles. It's fascinating to look at the trajectory of Brian's life in the post-Tiffani era. He seemed drawn to intense, high-octane relationships. He spent over a decade with Megan Fox, a relationship that was constantly in the headlines, filled with breakups, reconciliations, and paparazzi chases. Brian became the guy who was always in the eye of the storm. He was the protector, the fighter, the guy pushing cameras away. Tiffani took a completely different path. After leaving 90,210, she slowly pivoted away from the chaotic vixen image. She found success on shows like White Collar, but her real second act came as a lifestyle personality. She started hosting cooking shows. She wrote children's books. She curated an Instagram feed full of sourdough bread, school lunches, and family vacations. She married artist Brady Smith and built a life that looked remarkably peaceful. While Brian was dealing with tabloid drama, Tiffani was teaching America how to make the perfect roast chicken for decades. These two lived on parallel lines that never intersected. They attended the same industry parties but were never seen together. They had mutual friends but never appeared in each other's stories. It wasn't necessarily a Cold War, but it was a definite freeze. It was the kind of silence that suggests there was simply too much baggage to unpack. Brian has been honest about his role in that distance. In his podcast and various interviews over the years, he's reflected on his younger self with a critical eye. He's admitted to being jealous. He's admitted to being possessive. He has described those years as heavy. When you're a young man in Hollywood, fueled by ego and insecurity, you don't always make the best decisions. He seemed to carry a sense of regret about how the Tiffani chapter closed, a feeling that maybe he hadn't treated the situation with the maturity it deserved. Tiffani, however, has always taken the high road. When asked about Brian in recent years, she has refused to take the bait. She hasn't trashed him. She hasn't spilled secrets. Last year, she told News that she had no regrets about their time together. She framed it beautifully, saying that they were just kids learning how to love and learning how to be adults. She took the sting out of the tale. By refusing to paint the past as a tragedy, she opened the door for a future friendship. But why now? Why, after 30 years of silence, did they choose a random Wednesday in November 2024 to finally come together? Context is everything. The 90,210 cast has been through the ringer in the last few years. The sudden death of Luke Perry in 2019 broke the hearts of everyone involved. It was a wake-up call that they weren't immortal teenagers anymore. Then came the long, painful battle and eventual passing of Shannen Doherty. Losing 2 members of their core family has a way of putting petty grievances into perspective. The feuds of the 1990s seem incredibly small. When you're attending the funerals of your friends in the 2020s, there's a sense that the surviving cast members are circling the wagons. They are realizing that they are the only people on Earth who understand what that specific experience was like. Nobody else knows what it felt like to be inside the 90,210 bubble in 1994. That shared trauma and shared triumph bonds them for life, whether they like it or not. And so, we arrive at the Sabrina Carpenter concert. The setting itself is perfect a pop concert, the kind of place you go to have fun, to let loose. It wasn't a stuffy awards show. It wasn't a somber memorial. It was a celebration. The event was sponsored by Sandals Resorts, creating a relaxed vacation-like atmosphere right in the heart of Los Angeles. The photos tell the real story. Look at the body language. Brian is wearing a gray bomber jacket, a white t-shirt, and a baseball cap classic. Casual dad vibes. Tiffani is in a white floral cutout shirt and black jeans. They aren't standing stiffly with a PR rep hovering nearby. Tiffani is leaning into him. She's grabbing his arm with both hands in one shot, laughing at something he said. Brian has a genuine, soft smile on his face. This isn't the look of two people who are fine with each other. This is the look of two people who have actually reconnected. It suggests that this public outing wasn't the first time they've spoken. You don't get that level of physical comfort after 30 years of silence without some private conversations happening first. It implies that the bridges have been rebuilt quietly, away from the cameras, before they were ready to show the world. The internet reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Comments flooded social media. "My 90s heart is exploding," one user wrote. "David and Valerie forever," said another. It tapped into a deep well of nostalgia. For a generation that is currently watching the world change so rapidly, seeing two icons of their youth looking happy and healthy together feels like a warm hug. It's a reminder of a simpler time, but it's also a redemption arc for Brian. For years, he was often painted as the villain in his breakup stories. Seeing Tiffani, the woman who arguably knew him best during his most formative years, embracing him so warmly, changes the narrative. It shows that he has grown. It shows that he has made amends. It validates his current era as a family man who has left the toxicity of his past behind. And for Tiffani, it reinforces her reputation as the ultimate class act of Hollywood. She navigated the Shark Tank of the 90s, built a brand on and has now shown that she possesses the grace to welcome her past back into her life without bitterness. There is also a fascinating full-circle element to the venue. They were at a concert for Sabrina Carpenter, a young blonde pop star who is currently navigating the exact same kind of chaotic, meteoric fame that Brian and Tiffani navigated 30 years ago. Watching them enjoy the show is like seeing the alumni returning to high school. They made it out, they survived the madness, and they're sitting in the stands watching the next generation go through it, while they get to enjoy the music without the pressure. It's worth noting that they weren't alone. They were surrounded by other friends and industry types, but the magnetism was clearly between the two of them. The headlines didn't care about who else was in the VIP section. The headline was The Reunion. It highlights just how powerful the 90210 brand still is. 3 decades later, people still care about who David Silver is dating or who Valerie Malone is talking to. This reunion also puts a final nail in the coffin of the feud rumors. For years, gossip columns would recycle stories about who hated who on that set. By standing together, Brian and Tiffani are effectively rewriting the history books. They're showing that whatever happened in 1995 stays in 1995. They are proving that adults can grow out of the drama that defined their youth. It's interesting to wonder where this goes from here. Does this open the door for them to work together again? Tiffani has been adamant about moving forward with her cooking and lifestyle brand, while Brian has been dipping his toes back into reality TV and podcast. Could we see Tiffani on Brian's podcast? Could we see Brian guest starring on a cooking special? The chemistry is clearly still there. The fan base is clearly hungry for it. But even if this is a Tevin, if this is just one night, one concert, and one set of photos, that's enough. It provides a sense of closure that fans didn't even know they needed. The story of Brian and Tiffani was always one of the great what-ifs of the 90s. What if she hadn't joined the show? What if they hadn't broken up? What if the writers hadn't pitted them against each other? Those questions don't matter anymore, because the answer to where are they now is finally a happy one. They are here. They are smiling. They are friends. In a year that has been full of heavy news, and for a fan base that has suffered real losses, this moment serves as a beacon of light. It's a testament to the power of time. It teaches us that wounds heal, awkwardness fades, and eventually, you can stand next to the person who broke your heart 30 years ago and just enjoy the music. The saga of Beverly Hills 90,210 will always be filled with drama. It was a show built on betrayal, love triangles, and teenage angst. But the real-life ending for Brian Austin Green and Tiffani Thiessen turned out to be something the writers never could have scripted. A peaceful, genuine, undramatic happiness. And honestly, that's the best season finale we could have asked for.